business. So for 10 years I worked as a business person, as an MBA, working with designers, first for a small firm in Palo Alto, and then I worked for IDEO for many years, and that was just an incredible time for me. And so because I had an MBA, they would all...
Who was head of IDEO?
David Kelly was. In fact, David said, we're going to be doing big things here, and we need, and it was Tom Kelly and I were the only MBAs there for a while. There are many more now, but for a period of time, I think they would throw me to the lions. Any big corporate environment, if you were Fortune 500, you'd whatever. So they used to call me that kind of elephant hunter. I'd go out and find these big things. So one of the big things that came along was this opportunity that was resident in the Northeast Corridor to put the high-speed rail here, the Acela as we're known today, and a lot of people don't know this, but the Acela brings half the travelers back and forth. You think half of them are on, most of them are on planes, but they're not. Most of them are on the train, and particularly between Boston and New York, there wasn't a train. I mean, it was a 5-hour, it was the milk train you couldn't take. So a lot of people complain about the Acela that it wasn't really that innovative, but when you think about where it came from, right? This is the organization. Now, when you see that logo, what does it feel like to you? The old Amtrak, and as we all thought that, oh my God, late trains and like bureaucratic, and oh my God, why would you ever want to be doing, this kind of stuff? But of course, they wanted to do something like this. They wanted to bring a new high-speed train into existence, and as a management team they ran all around Europe and they experienced these wonderful high-speed trains that went from various cities, from Madrid to Barcelona and from here to there, and it's like, we want that, we want that. And it was very difficult when you think about the old Amtrak, like that going to that was like a big shift that they had to do. So of course, always being hungry for a challenge, we at IDEO assembled a very big team, a very quick, and I'm very happy I've got my project manager Dave Privatera here today. We're reminisce about what an incredible time this was for us. But there was lots of firsts going on in this environment for IDEO and for me, somebody that was trying to help put this whole thing together. And so this is kind of what it looked like. It was the first big services project that design organization had done, like a really big, big services thing. And it was the first time we had to bolt on a brand team to this, because at that time IDEO didn't do branding work, but we had to invent a new brand, which was how we got the Acela thing to happen. It was the first big government contract, and everybody's like, oh please, the government, oh why do we want to do that? And they have audits, and you got to put in this paperwork, and oh it's awful, and that sort of thing. And of course it was the first train, so the first train the other thing had done. And it was the first time I had ever worked with something I want to talk a little bit about, which is a customer journey framework, which is a design thinking tool that I find to be incredibly powerful in this new environment that I find myself working in so much. And it was the first time for me that I was able to look at, because I've been working in the product world, I was attracted to design and industrial design and beautiful sculptural things, and be able to apply the lessons there in the services environment. And for me, that's where the dots started, connecting for me. And it's the beginning of my journey of where I am now. So I just want to talk a little bit about a couple of things that I've learned that I find very helpful in thinking about the new world that I work in, which is services, which is this thing called the customer journey. So first of all, just as a mental model, and just to show you kind of where this particular management team was, and where a lot of management teams that I find today are, that if you think about, they said they want a sort of seamless journey. So during the course of the work that IDEO did, this journey was created, and it wasn't something that the management team was really thinking about too much, the journey so much. They were thinking about the train. And so one of the first things they did was they went out and spent $750 million on a train, and the whole group is thinking about this as a train. If you look at this diagram, you see that the train is like the 8th node on the journey. And it was important, yes, but when you think about how you put funding together and the emphasis that you put on it and how you muster resources to do something new, without the perspective of the journey, you would tend to miss some things, right? Like how much you might have to put into station infrastructure or information technology systems or any number of those things. So it was very, very interesting to me that, how this helped drive, once this framework emerged, helped drive the management team to making completely different decisions, or it just filled their heads with what the real the game was that, you know, this is the essence of a service. When you buy a service, you don't just buy one notion of it, you buy this whole experience. And so I find that, I'm working with a lot of service companies now, that this is happening all the time, where people really aren't thinking about the entire journey along the way, and they put all their money in one bucket, one, you know, node on the continuum, and they forget a lot of things. And so, you know, people that are in retail and other kinds of more consumer things are good at this, but if you work with B2B companies, they're just like terrible with this. They think it's like at the transaction level that you know, all the action goes on, and they pay very little attention in like what goes on in the sales process and what goes on in the contract administration process and all that stuff that makes the seamless journey happen. So this is a framework that I think is very, very important to think about in terms of services. And if you think about it here, this is the last thing to talk about, how it would, if you had this kind of a framework, you could actually be more expansive about the experience. Like one of the things that was that there's no way to continue your journey at this one node, at 128. So it caused them to think about, well, maybe we ought to get a partnership going and get a car rental place there. But that wasn't there before. So the propensity to like make something big like this to happen, but have this awful experience, would have been there had they not had this framework. So when I like to teach this kind of framework, particularly in service companies, because they're, you know, a lot of them, they don't have this sort of walking around knowledge. But I start the discussion talking to them about how you go about thinking about making something new. And you know, you can flash like you look at it like it's a process. You flash a very complex process map in front of them. And they're like, yeah, we can relate to that as process map. Or you flash a organizational chart in front of them and you think, well, yeah, we approach it that way too. But very few companies now are really thinking about it from the customer's standpoint. So I guess what I want to say is that, you know, these kind of journey maps are very, very important if you want to do customer-centric innovation, because it allows you to have a way of thinking about what the customer wants to do. The other thing that was a big learning for me, there was a very natural, because an object, there was a lot of prototyping that went on, and the designers were having a great time with this. It was a 60-foot prototype, and it was in the IDEO office for 6 months, and everybody got to play with it. And you know, on any given day, there'd be people running, you know, like in wheelchairs, trying to figure it out if they could go from the chair to the bathroom, or how somebody would work behind the galley. And there was all this kind of really great design stuff going on. Of course, you would know that the designers would be doing things like that. So that was great. But there was some other thing going on, and that was the Amtrak management team kept calling up and saying, can we bring this one there? Can we bring that one there? And they would start bringing their operations people to go see this prototype. And they would, you know, people that were in unions and things like that were trying to make a lot of changes in the you know, who was going to serve on this train, for one thing, because the way their union contracts were built was that the most senior people would get like the new stuff, and they didn't want the senior people having the new stuff because they wanted to have a great experience, and some of these people were known to be rather surly. But they would, right, you don't want those people on the new train. But in any event, they would come and they would bring their people through. And this prototype served as this device to get people communicating with one another in a way that I hadn't really experienced before, because so much of this seamless journey had to depend on the operations of the organization. So they would do that, and then it sat in Union Station for a long time to get the public to say. So it became this communications device for Amtrak that was really interesting. And it showed to me how much service organizations can get out of prototyping, but baffles my mind now that the work I'm doing, I've called on probably 100 service companies in the last 3 years, and so very few of them prototype. It is just an unknown thing in that world that really blows my mind.